Welcome to the Level Up English podcast, the best place to come to practice the English language, learn about the British accent and culture, with me, your host, Michael Lavers. Hello, English learners, and welcome back to the Level Up English podcast. My name is Michael Lavers, and it's great to have you here again. Today, I've got a longer episode with a special guest, Lewis from Teachify. So Lewis is an English teacher from the UK who is now living in Spain. And he really kindly joined me today to talk about the topic of change. So we spend some time at the beginning talking about himself, talking about Lewis, what he's up to. We speak a little bit about teaching and his transition to in-person to online lessons because of the pandemic, of course, and a little bit more as well before we move on to our topic of change. So we talk a little bit about some changes that are happening in the world, some big changes in our lifetimes, and a little bit on where we see the world going in the future. How is it going to change? Is it going to change for the better or perhaps for the worse? We'll talk about all this today. And another thing you can look forward to and listen for is the many, many expressions that Lewis uses when he talks. He is a fantastic English teacher and he uses some really good natural idioms and expressions. And I think you can learn a lot just from listening to this conversation. And remember, if you do want a little bit more help following along with us, I do upload the entire conversation to Level Up English members with a live transcript. So that means you can listen and read at the same time. It will highlight the words as we're talking. And I've also added some bonus things too. So now there will be a vocabulary list. There will sometimes be a quiz that you could try as well to see how much you learnt, a review PDF. So a little bit more, over there, just to make sure that you are getting the most out of the podcasts and you're learning as much as possible. So if that sounds interesting to you at all, you can go to levelupenglish.school, click on that members button at the top of the page, or simply just click in the description of this podcast and there'll be a link there. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I think it was a really fun one. So I'll jump right into it now. And remember, we've also got a bonus chat with Lewis coming out this Friday for members too. Here we go. Enjoy it. Thank you for listening or watching. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Level Up English podcast. I am delighted to be joined today by Lewis from Teachify.
Exactly, from Teachify, Spain. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, my name's Lewis, and right now I am in Sevilla, in basically the desert. It is almost 40 degrees today, so it's boiling, it's roasting, it's scorching.
Good words there, good words. That's amazing. I've never been there before, but how long have you been there now?
So kind of on and off for like 6 or 7 years. So my girlfriend is from Sevilla, so I came here for love, like many people do. And then in between, I moved to Australia for a year and then ended up coming back here. But in total, 6 or 7 years.
Lots of hot places then.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why, because I'm so sweaty all the time. But hey.
I'm always complaining about the temperature here in the summer. Like recently, it's been quite hot for England. Like the other day, it was like 30 degrees. And I'm complaining about this. And my students are just like, Michael, that's so cold. This is ridiculous. Like it's 40 here, wherever they are.
Exactly. Get a grip. What's wrong with you?
But yeah, I don't know if I could cope with that.
Air conditioning
yeah.
vital.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? So we complain in the UK a lot and people think we're kind of weak, but we often don't have air conditioning. So that does come into
So we're
play.
not weak.
Yeah. Maybe might even be hotter inside than where you are.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know. To be honest, I sweat a lot when I'm back home, and I sweat a lot when I'm in Sevilla. But if I've got air conditioning, if I've got some nice cold drinks next to me, then it helps me get through it.
That's true. You made me think of a good expression. Maybe I could test you and teach the listeners too. If you're sweating a lot, what are you sweating? You're sweating
Buckets. You are sweating buckets.
sweating buckets. Yeah, sweating so much. That's a good one. But yeah, so maybe could you tell us a bit about like what you're up to these days? Like, are you teaching, and what does your schedule look like?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I mentioned that I work for a company called Teachify, and this all happened about 3 to 4 years ago when one of the people I used to work with in an English academy in Sevilla, he is half Spanish and half English. Lucky him. Um, and he wanted to set up his own academy, and the academy was born with the idea that it would be like Uber Eats or an Uber, where you are a student and you think like, I want a teacher, but I want the teacher to come to me or wherever I can have the class, whether it's in a bar, their office, or at home. All of this was pre-pandemic, and we set up a website in Sevilla, started promoting our services to one-to-one clients and to companies as well, and it was going well, and there were no problems. It was a little bit tough some days when you had to cycle from like one side of a city all the way to the other side in the boiling heat of Sevilla. So I was sweating buckets. So then the pandemic came, and all of our classes went online, and we were a little bit worried, like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, how are we going to manage this? But we managed to keep all of our company clients, and since then have been growing. So the pandemic was a bit of a blessing in disguise. And yeah, now I'm in Sevilla, but I actually spend half of my time in Sevilla and half of my time in Brussels. Um, just basically 2020. This year I've been in Brussels, and it's a kind of new challenge, new experience. And I've been trying to learn French at the same time
Mm.
because my partner got a job in Brussels. So then, like before, I've been following her. But because I'm British, and because of Brexit, it means that it's a little bit difficult to stay there as long as I want. So I'm 3 months in Brussels, then 3 months in Spain, where I am a resident, and thank God I can spend as long as I want.
That's good. That's nice. It does seem to be getting tougher these days, doesn't it? We have to all be more flexible with Brexit and with COVID and all these other things that might be going on, like the economy and flight cancellations. We've got to be really flexible with how long we can stay somewhere, changing our plans. It's a bit of a nightmare, but I'm glad you've sorted it out. It seems anyway. Well,
Everything's under control, just about.
yeah, hopefully. I think if I got you correctly, you said the company started, you were teaching face to face, and now it's more digital online.
Exactly, yeah. So we were teaching face to face. So we'd actually strangely go and like knock on someone's door as if we were delivering a pizza, with a notebook in hand, and like, hey, ready for your English class?
I've taught someone before, like they came to my place and I taught a few lessons that way. I've never been to someone else's house though. So did you ever have any dodgy moments or like weird places where the house was a bit, I don't know, anything weird come up, or was it always fine and it was always a nice experience?
I'd say for the most part, everything was absolutely fine. It was just a little bit uncomfortable or awkward because you might have, I don't know, kids in another room who
Mm,
are playing, or you might have the husband or wife in another room, and maybe they'll have an argument in the middle of the class, and you'll be like, like what do I do in this situation? There was nothing that really stands out and made me feel like horrible whilst I was there, but many kind of like interactions have been like, "Hi, I'm the English teacher," and not knowing whether to speak to the other person who was at home or just to go straight into another room to teach my class. A lot of uncertainty and doubt, and I would
mm.
just keep my mouth shut and be like, using gestures to be like, where do I go? What do I do?
I suppose it's like it's such a new thing. It's not like an everyday occurrence, so we don't have these like social norms for that situation because for most people it's new, isn't it? That kind of situation. Yeah, I think I would be so awkward doing that. But
Me
no,
too.
it sounds good. What do you prefer then? Do you prefer that kind of style, or do you prefer the online style you're doing now?
I think now I've got used to working wherever I want, online using Zoom or Google Meet or Teams and all of these different video call platforms. And I've got used to the comfort of doing that and the freedom of doing it as well. And I think in particular for one-to-one classes, it is just as good, if not better, for both the teacher and the student if the classes are online. Maybe there are some certain things that you might miss out on, like, I don't know, when you shake someone's hand or when you see them in person. Maybe it's easier to have a laugh, but
Mm.
also for the same reason, it could be easier that there are some awkward moments. If you're speaking through a screen, you always know that you can't insult this person and they can hit you. Uh, but I'd say at least for one-to-one classes, I'd say that online is better. And then for group classes, it depends. There are different tools that we can use to be able to adapt the classes and use breakout rooms where you have, let's say, 6 people in the Zoom call, and then you break them up into two different portals or areas, and then they can have a chat with their partner like they would in the past when you'd say, okay, these 3 questions, speak to your partner and remember what they say. And then you can tell us what your partner said. So there are always possibilities to do the same thing online as what we used to do in person.
Mm. Yeah, that's what we do a lot in our group classes too. I think it does work quite well because the breakout rooms give everyone a chance to talk a bit more. I've never done like a real classroom group lesson, so I can't really compare. But yeah, I would agree that I think that at least one to one, well, in my view, all lessons, I think the pros outweigh the cons with the convenience, the price is usually much cheaper,
Mm-hmm.
all the time, all that kind of stuff. I suppose, yeah, there's just a few cons like connection issues. Maybe one for me is that in real life, face to face, you feel that there are more distractions sometimes and you can feel more awkward because I don't know, it depends on the person, but for me, I feel more comfortable sitting behind a screen because I'm in my own room, right?
Uh-huh.
But I feel like language gets much harder to practice when you're in the real world in a noisy cafe looking face to face. And I find that it's like a different challenge, but that's a small thing that I've noticed for myself anyway. But I don't know about you.
I think that's also a challenge for just like not necessarily the language and the communication, but like I get awkward sometimes when I'm ordering a coffee in a bar, and then that'll be the times when I'll like forget what I wanted to say, or I
Mm-hmm.
won't be able to find the right word. And this will happen more if you've got distractions, people around you, and then I'll start sweating again. Here we go. Lewis is sweating again. And then it might have an effect on my speaking or my teaching or whatever.
Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely. I guess when you're really aware of what you're doing, you kind of you lose your train of thought. Like I feel like I'm about to do now.
Ah, no,
But yeah,
you've got it. You've got it.
got
Stay on the right track.
it. Well, let's move lanes, change tracks a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And I want to ask you about change. I thought that could be a good topic today. And I've already seen that you've had quite a lot of change in your life with the pandemic, changing the way you do your work, changing maybe the way you live in a new country, and adapting to the pandemic as well. So, well, I guess first of all, I want to ask you, how do you think you respond to change normally? Like, do you think you're quite accepting of change or do you tend to resist it? How do you respond to change?
I'd say usually I have mixed feelings about it, but I've always been looking for change, basically, because I feel like sometimes if I stop still and don't move and move abroad or change job or change people I hang out with, then after a while, maybe it's a strength, maybe it's a weakness, but I'll feel like I need something new. I need
Mm-hmm.
a new challenge. So, for example, this year, um, I never really believed that New Year's resolutions are a good idea, but I was thinking like, oh, I should learn a new language, maybe French, for example. And then a week, 2 weeks later, my girlfriend told me, I've got a job in Brussels. Uh, what should we do? So from that point, bearing in mind that I like change and I like to have different experiences in different places, I was thinking, hey, I'm up for it. I'm up for the change. I'm up for the challenge. So I'd say I'm usually quite an adaptable person. And I think it's quite a common trait to have in teachers that you can adapt to different environments, different
Mm.
people, and usually we're always acting a little bit anyway. Like when we're teaching classes or we're uploading videos, we're always putting on a different persona. So then if you do that in your day to day at work, then I think it's easier to transfer those skills to life changes and moving abroad. So I'd say to sum up, change for me is good. You might have mixed feelings and think like, oh, is this a good idea? Am I going to regret it? But I think you will get more out of change than being afraid of it and then resisting this possible change.
Really well said. I love that. I think there's a lot of good vocabulary here as well, like being adaptable. And if you're not adaptable, you might stagnate, which is, when you're not moving, you're not making progress, you're staying the same person, like, there's no development. So yeah, I think it's good to be adaptable and try to, accept change when it's appropriate. But yeah, I guess naturally, I feel like most people are a bit reluctant to do so, aren't we?
And are you? Given that you're asking me about change, how do you feel about change? And are you reluctant to changes, or do you kind of welcome change with both arms open?
Embrace change.
Exactly.
I think I'm quite welcome to change. I feel like maybe I have the opposite problem where I don't like things being the same. So I tend to move. Every year I'm moving to a new place, trying to keep things different, trying. What else do I change? I mean, if you've known me for like 10 years, I would have had like 5 different hairstyles, like from super long hair now to no hair. So I think I'm pretty good with change.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I suppose the change, there's 2 types of change, isn't there? There's one that we put ourselves into, like moving to a new country because we want to, and there's the one that's like pushed upon us, where we don't really want to, like being stuck in a lockdown for a few weeks, and that wasn't fun for anyone really.
Yeah, now even with that, I'd say that I adapted quite well to the
Hmm.
change. Um, Obviously, I was stuck in a small flat in Spain, and the lockdown in Spain was really, really intense. Like, I remember speaking to my parents and my friends, and they'd tell me, like, oh, yeah, we've just been out for our daily walk, and we've just been to the shops a couple of times. Like, in Spain, that wasn't a possibility. Like
Mm.
you weren't actually allowed to go out for a walk unless you were maybe carrying some bags to make it look like you were going to the supermarket. So you had to be at home 24/7 unless you were going to pick up some groceries and shopping. But when it happened, I thought, it is what it is. What are we gonna do? I might as well do something else to distract myself from the sad reality of what's going on. In hindsight, I probably should have started creating more content and started my Instagram account during the pandemic when I had so much time on my hands. But what did I do? I played Football Manager for hours and hours and hours on end, and it was great.
I mean, if you had a good time, that's all that matters, right?
I mean, it helped. The time flew.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for me was coping with that change of the lockdown is thinking that compared to my previous life, it was worse. It was a bit annoying having some freedoms taken away. But I could also, I suppose this is the perspective of being a teacher too, and talking to people around the world that, say, for example, in China, they've had very strict lockdowns. And I know we've got
Mhm.
Chinese listeners, so I don't mean anything by this. But as far as I know, in some places in China, they want really allowed to go out at all at some points. And in the UK, well, at least in London, where I was, we could go for walks, for exercise, go to the park. There was a weird rule where we weren't allowed to sit down, but we could keep walking, which is bizarre.
Don't sit down.
So there was like an old lady on a bench, and I was whispering, like, "Hey, she's breaking the law. She's sitting down."
How dare she?
But just like being out in the sunlight, I could try to appreciate that because I knew not everyone could. But just want to make clear that even if you were in a strict lockdown, I think there's always someone in a worse situation, right? So I think we can always think that way if we really want to be optimistic and positive. So that got me through it, I would say. It's just that optimistic mindset.
Like it could always be worse. Whenever we're complaining about anything and any bad changes that might happen to you, you'll always think like, I'm going to put things in perspective and realize that, listen, this actually isn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Taking the example of the pandemic, it's like, well, at least I can go to the shop and I have money so I can buy food and I can, I don't know, go up onto my rooftop and sunbathe for a little bit. So it could always be worse. Of course, it could be better as well. But I think it's a better way of thinking if we think like, could be worse. So I'm going to appreciate what I have and be grateful for what I have. Whereas if you think, it could be so much better, then you're just going to be unhappy and it's probably not going to help.
It could always be better, so it doesn't really help, does it? I mean, I like thinking that even in the lockdown, we still have much better lives than 99.9% of people throughout history, because we have like plumbing and heating and electricity and all that kind of stuff, where even if we're stuck inside, we have all that stuff. So I think we can't really complain, really.
We're fine. All good.
Yeah, good. Well, I'll leave it up to you now where to go with this question, but what would you say is some of the biggest changes that we've had let's say in our lifetimes? I guess we're similar ages, but looking back, what do you think are some of the biggest changes that have changed the way we live, maybe for better or worse? Could be technology, travel, whatever.
Well, I think mentioning technology, we can't like avoid that. And we have to focus on the fact that at least when I grew up, people were playing on their Nokia 3, what was it, 3310? What, I don't know if you remember the
I have
model,
no memory of that, but
but
I know the phone you mean.
there was a Nokia basically, and everybody was using a Nokia when people started having like relatively modern mobile phones. And as a child, I remember like asking my parents like, "Hey, can I borrow your phone? I really want to play Snake." Because there was a game which was really, really popular, probably around the year 2000. And it was really simple. And it was just on a really small screen where you'd have some food and the food would keep moving. And you had to take control of the snake to be able to keep eating this food. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I'm getting distracted. But that shows how far we've come in 20 years, 22 years, that used to be the best game that everybody was crazy about. They were absolutely obsessed with when I was growing up and I was a little kid. And over time, it's just got progressively better and we've had more and more options. So that's one option, that mobile phones have changed the way we live
Huge.
so much, like so much. And even if we move on a few years to when I was like 14, 15, and this was when Facebook came out. And I remember at school creating my account, signing up to Facebook, and it was the first social media, or at least the first one, apart from maybe MySpace and stuff like that, which came before. But Facebook was like, wow, now I can speak to people, I can upload photos with them, just as I was starting to go out and have more of a social life. So that like revolutionized the way that I lived, and my teenage years and my time at university would have been so, so, so different if that hadn't existed. So technology, mobile phones, social media for me has changed absolutely everything.
It sounds like you're talking about it in a positive way. Like, do you think these are all good things? Like, are you quite happy about all these changes?
I would say I would rather have the things that we have now, perhaps because I'm used to using them. But there are, of course, drawbacks and negatives that come with our addiction to social media and our phones. Like we're recording through a screen on our laptops or our computers, and right now I've got my phone right next to me, and then I'll see some notifications popping up on my phone at the same time. And the same thing will happen if I'm going out for a meal with my friends or my family. And I don't know if you've ever played the game, but it's like the first person to touch their phone during the meal buys everything. It's on them. So this is a way, and it shows how addicted everybody is to social media and mobile phones. The fact that even still, people can't go a full meal without looking at their phone and staying connected, which is a negative thing, but it is the way life is nowadays. And for us, we've seen the change from life before that and then what it is like now. Whereas for people, I don't know, my cousins who are 10 years younger and all of their life has been spent online. They have always been
Hmm,
connected. So
that's weird.
that, of course, is great because then they'll be really naturally talented at programming and stuff like that, I assume. Tell me, young people. But they've always had this and they don't know what life was like before it. Whereas I'm 29 and I've seen the change in society to people actually speaking to each other and having more conversations and living off the grid, more or less, to being absolutely hooked on technology, mobile phones, and it being a day-to-day part of life.
That really blows my mind to think about these kids that have had iPads from the age of 2, and you see some like babies basically touching the screen as if it's as if they're an adult. They can do it so easily, and I guess we still don't know how that's going to affect them, if it would be a good thing or a bad thing or a neutral thing, because they haven't reached an old age yet. But yeah, it's really really fascinating. I guess I can remember, like, not super old, but I can remember very old, big, massive computers, and we've kind of progressed up quite quickly. But yeah, it's weird to think about. And one thing I've noticed as well is I feel like in the very recently, in the last couple years, phones seem to be more essential. Like, I feel like 5 years ago, it was plausible to live without a smartphone. It'd be difficult, but I think you could. But I think now it's becoming almost impossible. That you saw with things like in many countries you had to check in with COVID on your phone to
Mm-hmm.
use your what they called the
Get
COVID
the
apps.
COVID passport or the EU digital certificate,
Yeah.
whatever they call it.
So I felt like paying for things and travel, a lot of stuff I see in London. Like we have supermarkets in London. I don't know if you've seen them where you have to scan your phone on the app to enter the supermarket.
Ah,
And I didn't have the app and they didn't let me in. I had to download the Lidl's app to get in. And I guess if you're if you're homeless, you don't have a phone, you literally cannot shop there. So it's weird to think how you know how vital these things are now.
like also related to that, paying. Like
Mm.
the amount of times that I have the conversation with students and people about money and how necessary a debit card is, a credit card. But now you just have the digital copy on your phone. And then a lot of the time now, I don't take anything out with me. So if I'm going out or I don't know, I'm going for a day trip, literally, I've got my phone and I have everything I need in life. And everything has become so easy, but also so dependent on having a phone to the point where if you're running out of battery, it's like, oh my God, panic mode. What am I going to do? How am I going to live? Like,
Mm.
I was traveling at the weekend and I was running out of battery. And I was like, oh, that means I won't be able to listen to my podcasts or my music. That means I won't be able to show my EU COVID certificate. That means I won't be able to get on the plane. Like, that means I'm a useless member of society. Do I exist if I don't have a phone? I don't know.
I think it's everyone's secret dream to live without a phone, isn't it? It'd be so nice, but I don't know if it's worth the hassle of the inconvenience and being, kicked out of society, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think it's recommendable. But hey,
Yeah.
if you do it, I don't know how you're listening to this, but good on you.
They've got some like wind up radio or something. They've somehow found this on their radio.
Testing.
Maybe final question on this topic of change is what would you say is your future predictions over the next 10 to 50 years or whatever like that? Do you have anything that you think is going to happen in maybe in phones or again any area, shopping, travel?
Well, some things I've seen, you mentioned that we have Chinese listeners. I watched a video recently, which was like basically you have for shopping, instead of trying on an item of clothing or something like that, you will have like a hologram or just a screen which would show exactly what it would look like on you.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you give your like details and your measurements, then you're like, oh, I want to try on that coat. Now here are my measurements. What would it look like? So then you don't have to go through the hassle of trying on something and then thinking like, oh, it doesn't fit or it doesn't suit me or whatever. So that's one thing that might
That's
change
so cool.
related to technology, which personally I think would be great because I don't like trying things on. And I always think like, it'll be fine. It'll fit me. And then I buy it and it's like, oh, it's like two sizes too small. Like, why is this happening?
Yeah, and especially if, where it's 40 degrees where you are, everyone's trying it on, they're all sweaty, and everyone's trying on the same clothes. It's a bit gross.
Yeah, agreed. But I'd say for general future predictions of change and how the world is going to change, I find it hard to be that optimistic. And I'd say, generally speaking, I am a positive person and I have an outlook on life where it's like glass half full rather than glass half empty. But like related to climate change, it's hard to like being in Seville. Now we have limited vegetation and trees. Imagine in like 50 years, it will be a desert. So speaking about the environment, I think it's going to change, and I can't see it changing for the better, I'm afraid.
Mm. Yeah, I guess it's definitely something to be concerned about, isn't it? But I think I heard a podcast just yesterday where they were talking about all the good things that are happening, because I think quite often it's all like doom and gloom, and that's what we like to see in the news. But I think one fact was, I don't remember exactly how much, but like for example, in China, the amount of green space, like forest space, has increased like by a huge amount in the last few decades. Maybe I'll fact check this and I'll give a reference in the show notes. But I
Hmm.
heard that compared to like 20 years ago, we have more forests than we did back then, which
Oh
sounds
yeah?
insane. But yeah, I'm going to have to fact check that. But I'll let you know if it is true or not.
Let's hope so. I mean, if so, that's great. Maybe there is reason to be optimistic about the future.
I always try to be anyway, but yeah, sometimes it is a bit more of a challenge, isn't it?
And like related to this as well with climate change, the man himself, Elon Musk, is always in the news about changing Twitter, about changing the way that we drive as well, changing the way that we go on a holiday, possibly in the future. We'll be going on holiday to Mars, and that's exciting. I think I'd be a little bit too afraid to get like in a spaceship and go all the way to another planet, but at the same time, whenever we speak about technology and you think how much technology has changed in the last decade, century, like how much could it change in the future?
Mm.
Like, and what are some of the cool inventions that we can't even imagine nowadays, but will become an integral part of life in 5, 10 years?
I love to think about this. One of my predictions is I see that technology is getting better at identifying things. Like if you have an iPhone, you take a picture of a tree or a landmark, it will have like a little, I don't know, glitter icon. You click on it and it will tell you, it identifies like the type of tree or the landmark just by looking at it, or the type of dog and stuff like that. And it's getting much better at doing that. So I think that's going to get better. And I wonder if in the future we're going to have it integrated. So maybe you have some like contact lens or something that you can just look at something and there'll be like some little, text that comes up and tells you what it is. That's my prediction for like the next few decades.
I mean, everything's very sci-fi, but then whenever we think about sci-fi as well, like going back in time to the sci-fi films, I don't know, Back to the Future, for example, and then people were like using flying cars. And where are the flying cars? Like, I want to know. I want to try one. I guess drones are kind of similar, but we don't have anything that looks like a normal car that you can just fly around. And whether it'd be a good idea or not, maybe there's a reason why we haven't kind of continued with this innovation, but I think it'd be pretty cool.
I've got a lot of opinions on this. I feel like it would be cool, but like
But
imagine if there's like a car crash in the sky and it's raining like burning metal on the streets. I feel like there'd be more problems than, benefits in that case.
but hey, you tried to be optimistic.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Now, I've just remembered another one. So I mentioned the football manager that I was addicted during the initial lockdown when the pandemic broke out. And one other thing related to video games, I've always really enjoyed playing since it was on like what's it called? The initial portable console, it was a Game Boy.
Yeah.
So since it was on a Game Boy Color, and then the other evolutions, progressions of the portable Nintendo. And then when Pokemon Go came out, that was like a huge moment where I was like, wow, there are Pokemon in the real world. Like, what a change. And the fact that that has like followed me from childhood to mid to late 20s, being like, I can catch Pokemon. What? Like, what the hell?
It is insane. I was in Japan when it first came out and everyone was doing it. People just in crowds, like looking at their phones. It's really, really quite creepy.
And like looking at society as well, like I was part of this drastic change and like creepy moment, but like whenever you were looking at other people doing it, it was like, what is wrong with people? Like, is this what we've come to?
Yeah, yeah. Like, look, staring at your phone, clambering through the bushes in a park. Yeah. Swiping up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see if there's a Pokemon Go 2 with like VR headsets, like ultimate experience. We'll see. See what comes of that.
Who knows? Who knows what might be around the corner?
Hmm. I think it could be a good time now to go over to the private podcast. So, for listeners who are listening now to the main one, we're going to have 10-15 minutes on the private podcast where we're going to be talking about idioms and expressions to do with change. Maybe we can do some kind of quiz on them and practice talking about them. And then we'll come back here in a second to say goodbye. But yeah, you ready to do some idioms, Liz?
Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm ready, willing, and yeah, raring to go.
Nice, nice. You use so many good expressions. I'll have to
Yeah,
define all these
subtitling will be
later.
tricky.
So, welcome back, everyone. We just finished our private podcast and we're back on the main one. We had a really good conversation about
Uh-huh.
change expressions. So, that might be useful for some of you. And I just want to ask you, Lewis, before we go, where would you like to send people? I know you've got Instagram and a few different things. So, if people want to know more about you, where should they go?
Perfect. Well, thank you for asking and giving me the opportunity to tell everybody. So, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I work for a company called Teachify, and related to Teachify, I also do a weekly podcast. It's very short episodes, and it's called Learn English with Teachify. So you can check that out on Spotify, Google, Apple, etc. And then, as you mentioned, I've recently set up my private Instagram account, which is at English with Lewis, where I've been uploading daily reels and also doing some lives with lots of other cool teachers and having some great conversations like this one. And we also have an Instagram account for Teachify, which is Teachify_English. And this is more focused on Spanish learners because we have translations for lots of posts and expressions which we upload. So if you are a Spanish speaker or you'd like to improve your Spanish, then that's another place where you can check me and us out.
Fantastic. Nice. I'll link all that in the show notes so people can click easily if they want to. And yeah, your Instagram seems to be going really well. I notice your followers are going up really quickly. You've collaborated with some really good teachers, like a lot of my friends as well. So yeah, check out Lewis's Instagram, definitely, guys. But yeah, I guess we'll leave it here. So thank you very much for joining me. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope you did as well, and the listeners, and hope we can do it again sometime.
Perfect. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thanks for getting it organized. And yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking about change. So now hopefully our lives are going to change for the better and the climate too. So we'll see.
Yeah, we're hoping for good change, but thank you again.
See you later. Bye bye.
You have been listening to the Level Up English podcast. If you would like to leave a question to be answered on a future episode, then please go to levelupenglish.school/podcast. That's levelupenglish.school/podcast. And I'll answer your question on a future episode. Thanks for listening.